3 weeks later, October 7th happened. I'm driving around every day saying, Hashem, I'm your vessel. Use me. Put me where I'm supposed to be, to the second. He kept showing me to the second why I was there. It was just unreal. And then I almost die. And the first time my name gets used is when someone's benching Gomel over the Torah for me. And
Wow.
I've been given my toughest kid in the world, is how I saw it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Anything But Traditional. I'm here today with Tasha Cohen, the most incredible woman I think I've ever met in my entire life. I literally do not know how you do everything, Tasha. Like, literally, I was just thinking about it. I'm like, how do you just do everything? But her bio, Tasha Cohen made Aliyah from London in 2012 and has a strong background in entrepreneurship and operations management, leading multiple startups across various industries. For over 20 years, she has also been deeply committed to mind, body, and soul healing, a passion that took on new urgency after October 7th. Understanding firsthand the physical and emotional toll of trauma, Tasha immediately took action. What started as transporting soldiers and supplies to bases quickly revealed a deeper need: physical and emotional support to IDF soldiers. In response, she founded Chayal's Angels, a grassroots initiative that became an official nonprofit in April 2024. Chayal's Angels provides healing relief to IDF soldiers through holistic treatments that ease the impact of physical and emotional trauma. With over 230 volunteers, the organization has already provided more than 10,300 treatments, ensuring soldiers receive the care and support they deserve.
We're actually closing into almost 11,000 treatments now.
Almost 11,000. Wow. Wow, that's insane. So, I have a few questions to start off with, and then we'll go into your upbringing. Okay? How do you do everything?
I definitely don't. I recently started working with someone who I had the exact same question for. How do you do everything? Um, I am, thank God, I'm good at delegating stuff that I know other people can take off. It's definitely something that was a skill that I had to learn. Maybe because I worked my way up through the businesses, I understood I have to pass on things. Something that doesn't need my attention, I won't spend time on. Something that needs to be vetted before my attention, my assistants will do for me. Um, and I am somebody who, once I get up and go, I don't stop until the end of the day. And once I've stopped, you can't move me. I'm like a hippo. You can't move me. And thank God for Shabbat, because I get so excited for Shabbat, because from when Shabbat comes in until Sunday morning, no news alerts, no one calling me, nobody asks me for anything. Even my mum knows not to phone me on Shabbat. Like, leave me alone. Shabbat Saturday night as well. It's my time and I need it to recharge.
So I hope it's okay to say this. I generally only have on Jews that are Orthodox, because the whole point of the podcast is to really break the stigma in Orthodox Judaism that you have to fit into, that the social constructs in
Yes,
Orthodox Judaism.
yes.
And I know that you're not a practicing Orthodox Jew, but the reason that I'm really having you on is, first of all, I was just blown away by you. But second of all, I found it very interesting, your relationship to Judaism, because when we met in person, I know that you were telling me all about your tattoos, but also you were like, everything in my life is about Hashem, and like me and Hashem, and like everything's about Hashem. So I think that was something that really like caught my attention about you, of like, okay, like there's a lot here. And also I think that that's very common, not common, but I think a lot of people in Israel have like that dual personality of like, okay, like I'm so God fearing and I love Hashem and everything is about Hashem, and like, yet I'm not fully religious. I'm not fully,
Well, I don't
um
fully adhere to the boundaries, shall we say.
yeah, yeah, I think it's very cultural in Israel. And I'd love to, hear more about your upbringing and how you grew up and, what's happened in your life over the years. I know that that's a lot of questions there. But yeah, if we can start with how did you grow up and what was your family like?
So, to start with, I grew up in a modern Orthodox environment. When my parents met at the age of 16, um, yeah, neither of them were particularly Orthodox. My mum, although grew up in a Jewish home, she actually went to a Catholic school, as was the way back in that time. But my grandfather was an undertaker, so he was Chevra Kadisha. Therefore, there was a lot of tradition in my mum's life, but he himself wasn't a huge God believer, which always interests me, by the way, because you're dealing with death. um, and I think, I mean, I understand it now. Like my mum always says, I don't want to be buried in a cemetery because they're soulless. Whereas to me, well, they're meant to be soulless.
Wow.
So
Wait, so where does she want to be buried?
she wants to be buried in a woodland.
What's up with
I don't know. It's a non-religious burial situation that you can have in England, where it's not like it's a woodland and you have a tree planted over you and benches and blah blah blah, in an ecological
Wow.
box.
That's so fascinating.
I don't get it, but I understand where she gets it from.
Is your
Um,
mom religious today or no?
no, not at all.
Okay. That's what
Um,
it sounded like.
yeah, so my parents became religious when my siblings were little, before I was born. I was born in 85. I've got two older siblings, and by the time I came along, they were Shomar Shabbat, Shomar Kashrut, um, quite quite orthodox, slightly modern, but quite orthodox. By the time I remember anything, to be quite frank with you, I would class us as modern orthodox. I remember I moved schools when I was about 8 or so, because I didn't feel I fit in, because we weren't as religious as the others in my year, and the other girls' parents struggled with, our mum doesn't want to come to your house because your mum wears trousers, or they didn't trust the kashrut, even though we were completely kosher. And so I moved to a modern Orthodox school at that point from an Orthodox one. I then went to a United synagogue my whole life, Edgware Yeshurun. I went to Hasnain Girls' School, which is an Orthodox school in London. I grew up with Judaism being a huge part of my world, but like a lot of people, I grew up seeing an awful lot of conflicts and hypocriticism. I hate that word. um, and I was confused. I was very confused. I remember as a teenager, um, I had stopped keeping Shabbat in my bedroom like my siblings had. My mum was also a lot more laxed about it, but we were never in front of my father. I'm sure he was aware, but pretended he wasn't. Um, and then I remember going through a phase of really, really focusing on keeping Shabbat and wanting to. Um, at 17, my family split up, and I was in a situation where I didn't know the word agnostic at the time. So I would call myself an atheist, but I wasn't. I was an agnostic. Um, and I had no interest in God or anything godlike at that point. I was
Wow.
I was angry. I'd had a very hard time as a teenager. I hated being a teenager, and I wasn't interested as far as I was concerned. I didn't want to hear the word God anymore. I had grown up seeing people tell me to do one thing and doing another themselves, and as far as I was concerned, I just wanted it out of my life. When I was 21, I went on an Asia Torah trip to South Africa, simply because it was an incredible price for this trip in South Africa. And I had a couple of friends going, and I had always wanted to go. I didn't know when I booked the trip that the rabbi of the trip was going to be someone who I met elsewise I used to be a Herbalife representative many years ago. I sold Herbalife and I had basically
Ah,
the whole of the Jewish market in London because it's kosher. And my rabbi I met, I didn't even know he was a rabbi. He came to me as a client. And then once we got to know each other, then found out he was taking the trip I was going on.
wow.
Such a crazy situation. And I left that trip with the understanding that I would marry Jewish, I would stop dating non-Jewish people, simply because I wanted to give my future children the opportunity to stay within Judaism. I feel very much quite strongly about who am I to make decisions for others, where in fact I just felt very strongly over I should keep it within the religion. I grew up being told I wasn't allowed to mix with non-Jewish people. I wasn't allowed to have friends with them. I wasn't allowed to date them. I knew quite well that I would probably be disowned by my family if I did, but it didn't matter to me. So at 21, I made the firm decision that, okay, just date Jewish people. I mean, I hadn't dated that many non-Jewish. I went to Orthodox. I grew up in Bnei Akiva. I grew up around a Jewish world. But I still didn't think anything of it. Sometime down the line, I then went to my rabbi and I said, are you sitting down? I would like to learn with someone. Could you find me a chavrusa? I would like to learn about God and the basics of Judaism. Because when I was 19, I lived in Nepal. I went and I lived in Christian orphanage I was out there for almost 6 months. And I would have had an amazing relationship with the pastor there. I'm still in touch with him 20 years later. And he
Well,
would ask me about Judaism. And I realized there and then that I knew how to do everything, but I didn't know the answer to the basic questions like why we had two halot. And I felt bad about that. So I wanted to learn. So I went to him and I asked for a chavrusa and he matched me up with someone and we sat every week and we learned about the history of Judaism. That's literally what we did. The Spanish
wow.
Inquisition, everything. We went through this little book, which I wish for years I've been trying to remember the name of it and I cannot. There was these two little books, one red and one blue, and they were very well known.
Oh, permission to believe and permission to receive?
I believe that could be it. I've been looking for these books for years. I would love to read them again. And I remember reading it, and my chavrusa said to me, just let me be the first. And I was like, what? And she went, just let me be the first when you know. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, okay. And a few weeks in, I sat down with her and I went, okay, you're right. There's no way the Jews would have been able to survive all of this if God didn't exist and he didn't ask us to be the chosen people and the chosen ones. And okay, you're right. I believe in God. That's it. And from that moment on, I decided to take on kashrut and Shabbat immediately.
Wow.
I was like, I know how to do all this. So if I know how to do this, why on earth wouldn't I be doing it? Um, and that was it. I became Shama Shabbat overnight. And then I will go into this part of the story later about the medical stuff, but I'd had some medical treatment. And then I called my rabbi again and I said to him, I would really like to go to seminary.
Wow.
When I had this medical treatment, not only was it Purim and they came and read me the Gila in the hospital, my grandfather passed away. My rabbi and my community just grabbed my whole family and held them through everything. And I
Wow.
felt that, yeah, this is me. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to go and ask all the questions I never felt I was allowed to ask. It was always, don't ask these, they're stupid questions. They're things you should have learned in nursery. Or I grew up in an environment where my father didn't like me asking questions publicly because he thought it would embarrass him, for instance. Um, and I really wanted to. So I went to Sharim in 2008 and I got there and I loved the first few weeks. Rebbetzin Pavlov, who is the Rebbetzin of the Midrashah there, she wasn't around. She was on a fundraising trip. And I loved it because all the girls there were between the age of 30 and 70. And I am someone who has always been connected to older people, even though I was only 22 myself at the time. And I loved it, loved it, loved it. But the program wasn't 100% for me. And then came the break, and I was thinking, okay, and the new girls started coming and they were all in their early 20s, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. Felt high schooly to me. And I had decided to go and look at other seminaries, and I had actually decided to go and move to another seminary.
Oh,
And I
wow.
walked into Sem on that Sunday and I said, okay, I'm
Wait,
leaving.
which
I'm going
seminary?
elsewhere. I thought I wanted to go to Midrash Rachel.
Ah, okay, fine.
And I walked into Sharim to tell them that, and they said to me, stop, Rebbetzin Pavlov is back. She wants to meet you. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you need to go and talk with her. And everyone around me was like, oh, what you done? Rebbetzin Pavlov? Oh, and I was like, what? They were like, you should be nervous. And I was like, I don't think so. And I walked in, quite frankly, quite cocky. And I was like, look, this isn't for me. It's too much parsha. It's too much text. It's not what I'm looking for. And Rebbetzin Pavlov said to me, I have had 4 phone calls this morning that said, I need to sit with you. 4 people have phoned me from London and said, this is the right place for her. She just needs to be settled. You need to talk to her. And she was incredible. The love and respect I have for that woman is quite something. She tailor-made me a schedule. She literally, let's pick and choose what's interesting to you,
Wow.
and give me a week. Give it a go. Let's try. And so that's what we did. And after a week, I was like, okay, you're right, I'm in. And then I said to her, but I really don't love learning Parsha. I don't know why, but I've always had an issue with Parsha. And I found a
Interesting.
class. Yeah, it is interesting. I found it boring. I found it, again, I was being cocky. I thought, I know all of this. Also to learn. It's so boring. It's text. I don't like text. I like interactive. And I found a class by Rav Daniel Katz, who is still a huge teacher of mine. And he was hosting a class on men and women in the old city 5 days a week. And I asked her if I may skip the end of SEM every day and go into the old city to study under him. And she allowed me to, which was not the norm at all. And years later, when I went to see Rav Katz again, I said to him, I don't know if you remember me. He immediately turned around and went, of course I remember you. You were there every single day. And I was like, yeah, that was me. So seminary turned out to be a wonderful experience. I then became more religious than I wanted to be because, it happens. And over the next few years, it took me time to work it out. During those sort of 4 years or so, I only wore skirts. I dressed very sneot, but I never felt comfortable because I'm a jeans and t-shirt girl. And I would look in the mirror and not see myself and not feel like myself.
Mhm.
And eventually decided that I could be me and wear trousers. I
Mhm.
could be me and wear t-shirts, and it didn't matter. But London had a problem with it because outside of Israel, you have to exist into a box. Otherwise, people don't know how to hold it. And
That's so funny because I think that many people think in Israel you have to be in a box,
I
and
think it's
as
the
a
opposite. I think it's completely the opposite. For me, I can be whatever I want to be in Israel and no one will blink an eye. If I want to cover my hair and wear my jeans, it's fine here. In London, they're like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people would say, I don't know how to set you up. You confuse me. And I was like, sorry, I confuse you, but I don't confuse me. I've
right.
never ever been someone to fit into society normal boxes. I've always been
Yeah.
someone who can fit into any box because I have interests. I have friends who are uber religious. One of my best friends is religious and covers her hair. And one of my best friends doesn't believe in God. It doesn't matter to me. You're my friend. And so I really struggled with that in London, really. And in Israel, I felt that I could be me. I could truly be me. And so when I moved back to Israel, I left in 2009, I came back in 2012. When I moved back to Israel, I decided that I was ready to wear jeans constantly and t-shirts and find my next path and my next part of my journey. And it worked for me.
Wow, and you moved to where?
So I lived in Jerusalem for a year, and then when I came back in 2012, I moved to Tel Aviv. I lived there for 7 years, and then I moved to Herzliya for a few years, and then I moved to Pardes Chana about 4 years ago.
Wasn't Pardes Chana.
It was what I wanted. So my dream is to live in the Golan. It has been my dream for many years, and I'm on my way to make it happen. And I was ready to leave the center, but my nephews are young and they live the other end of Tel Aviv. They live Bat Yam Rishon area.
Okay.
And I wanted to be close enough to them and my friends, but I wanted to be further out. And I knew people who had moved here and who were very happy. And then I came to check out the area and realized it ticked all my boxes. It wasn't far. It was kind of still central in the country. There was a lot of nature, 10-minute drive to the beach. But most importantly for me was it's half and half with Israelis and Olim and religious and secular. And that was what I wanted because I wanted the mix. The way I describe it to people is I'm half Ashkenazi, half Sephardi. So I was raised in an Ashkenazi environment, but we're Sephardi in our family. So I need that mix. And I need, like, in an all Israeli environment, I don't 100% feel like I fit in, but in an all Olim environment, I don't want to be there. So this was like the perfect mixture for me. And it was supposed to be just like 2, 3 years. And then the war started.
Ah, okay, fine. But do you I mean, is there a big community in Pardes Chana?
Yes,
Yeah.
huge. I don't know if there's a big single community anywhere. There's an awful lot of divorced people here, um, which makes the dating pool available for me. Um, but I'm not necessarily just looking for the person next door. For me, Rebbetzin Pavlov taught me something when I thought I was going to get engaged when I was young, and I never forgot it. And it was so important, and it's my number one dating advice to everyone. And she said to me, "You have three non-negotiables, and the rest of them are wants." And that was the most amazing advice anyone gave me. And I know what my three non-negotiables are, and they don't necessarily have to be next door to here.
Can you share what they are? I'm so curious.
Sure. Number one, they have to want to live in the north of Israel. It's something I am so desperate for and have wanted for years, and I feel like my soul lives there. Number two, they have to want to have children in their life, not necessarily biologically. With me, I'm someone who believes there's many ways to be a parent. Um, and I have always wanted to be a foster parent, in particular an emergency foster placement parent. And it's something
Wow.
that I've started the research and seeing if I'm eligible and stuff. And number three is they have to have an incredible deep faith and relationship with God of their
Wow.
own, however they handle it. And those are my three non-negotiables.
When you say God, I'm gonna ask this, but I hope it's okay. When you say God, do you mean Hashem or do you mean whatever God they
No,
really
Hashem. Look, to
Hashem?
me, there's only one God. I don't care
Yeah,
whether you call it Mother Nature, if you call it the universe, if you call it Buddha, if you call it Hashem. Hashem is Hashem to me. And we're all talking to the same person. And I don't mind whether you're a secular person who has a deep relationship with Hashem, or if you are Shomer Shabbat and part of a community and have a relationship with Hashem. But for me, the relationship with Hashem is the most deep and personal relationship you can have in the world. And if somebody doesn't have that, then they're just not going to be understanding of me because Hashem is every part of me.
for sure. No, absolutely. I'm curious, I know that you've changed a lot over the years. I know in the beginning we were talking about your tattoos. I'm curious, like, when that stage came to like be like, okay, I'm gonna get a tattoo now. And also like with your relationship with Hashem, like I know like you are so God fearing and you are so close to Hashem. Like what kind of inspired you to get a tattoo? I feel like tattoos and like Judaism are like very opposite. I feel like that's how we were raised, right? Like meaning
They
it's a
they they are seen as that, but to me they're not. To me, it doesn't make any sense. Like we were raised being told you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery if you've got tattoos.
yeah.
Halakhically, that's not correct.
Yeah.
Um, and okay, well, if that's the case, then why do women have their ears pierced? Because if you're going to go down that route, then you're not allowed to have your ears pierced either, right? Because we're not supposed to change our vessel, our bodies. For me, my first tattoo happened when I was 19 years old. I knew I wanted to have one for about 3 years. My first tattoo said my name in Nepalese because Nepal is where I went to discover myself. And I'd never felt that I had been seen as my own person. I was always this one's sister, this one's daughter, this one's cousin, because I'm one of the youngest. Plus, I grew up in the same place my whole life. Our family's in jewelry. All of our siblings and cousins went to the same school. So people know us.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have 2 siblings, but,
Okay.
there's 12 of us first cousins,
Oh, wow. Okay, fine.
and we all grew up within, I think the biggest age gap in the cousins is something like 14 years.
On your dad's side or your mom's side?
My dad's side, I don't have any on my mother's side. I had one cousin who sadly passed away, um, but only on my father's side do I have family.
So let's continue with the tattoo. So you got a tattoo at 19 of Nepal?
I had in Nepal, I had Natasha written in Nepalese, much to my mother's dismay. My mother hates my tattoos. So that was my first one. When I moved to Israel, I was about 26 and I had my second tattoo, which is
Before
um
seminary?
no, after seminary. During seminary, I only had one. I had the one tattoo. And then after seminary, in 2012, I had another tattoo, um, which is this one, when I finally got to make Aliyah. And it is a symbol that I love. It represents the fact that I'm half Israeli and half English, and that the mix is intertwined. Which growing up in England, I didn't feel Israeli. In fact, when people would insist on asking me where I was from, I was like, I'm English. What are you talking about? Okay, fine, my father's from Israel, but I'm English. And this was like my way of, no, I'm both. So that was my second one. It's an E and an I integrated together. Um, then came I have a great big one on my side, flowers, which was actually done in 2 parts, 4 years apart. So the first one I had it done, we can talk about this a bit later, but I have a lot of physical injuries and damage on my body, and I hated the left side of my body for years because it caused me so much pain. Um, all the damage is on the left side. I have nerve damage head to toe on the left side. This particular area
Wow.
has been my most painful and problematic area for years.
So
I
how you
mean,
get a tattoo on that? That must have been so
um,
painful.
it was, but it was also it was more important to me that I loved my body again, that I wanted to put something that was the most beautiful thing in the world to me on my body so that I loved it, because I was fed up of hating the left side of my body. And it was a really big part in my healing journey. I put my favorite flowers, which are Gerber daisies, with a infinity bow, which is infinity is like the symbol that I love.
Wow.
Um, and then 4 years later, I felt it wasn't finished, and I had another artist come in and make it more into artwork. Um, it needed to be brighter, it needed to be happier as far as I was concerned. And at the same time, I had my little meditation man, which is my promise to myself of always remembering to try and keep the balance of mind, body, and soul. And then I gifted myself as a birthday present a couple of years ago a forgiveness prayer. Again, part of my healing journey. This is a prayer called the Hopopono prayer. Originates from Hawaii. It says, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And it's a prayer that is used for self healing as well as other things. And it was a prayer that I was taught early on in my healing journey, and it guided me many way through it. I used to have it play on repeat on recording when I was sleeping sometimes, had it written in many places. And it was mostly about forgiving myself and forgiving my inner child. I love you and I'm sorry for everything, but please forgive me. And then saying thank you to yourself. And I wanted to wrap it around me. Um, and then the last one that I had was um, this ribbon. Inside it, it says, it was then that I carried you. And that is the last line of my favorite poem that one of my high school teachers and dear friend, Susie Goldberg, taught me when I was 14 years old. It's the poem Footprints, about when God is walking with someone at the end of their life. And I have it everywhere. I have it on my wall. I have it, the box that my laptop is currently sitting on is got it inscribed on top. And when October 7th happened, a few days later, I called my tattoo artist and I said, I have to put it on me. I have to put Hashem on me. And so I actually didn't do it for a whole year, but that is my reminder that Hashem is always holding me. And I am actually having another one done in a week, which is going to be the map of Israel with Hashem's hands protecting it. So For me, my tattoos are ingrained in my Judaism because I'm Judaism. I am God. There is no separation. So for me, when people go, but you're religious, but you have tattoos, and I'm like, but they're about me and God. They're about forgiveness. They're about healing. They're not mum or a little dolphin. It's my present to myself to remember always that Hashem's got me.
Wow, interesting. It's really interesting. So there's a lot to unpack. So you went to seminary, then you made Aliyah in 2012. And you also, I remember you were saying that you've been through like a lot of different career paths. So what were those different career paths?
Well, I started working at 12 and I was full time working by 17. Um,
As what?
so from 12 to 16, I nannied for a newborn and as she grew and helped the woman with her opening a cleaning business as well.
Wow.
At 16, I was working in a hospital doing discharge and receptional work. They then didn't have a full-time job for me when I needed it. So I became a personal assistant, and that's how my career started. And then I floated between being a personal assistant and working my way up to executive assistant and operational and head of operations and la 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 and childcare because I have a deep passion for babies. I think that the first 5 years of life are the most important. And I think that babies are the magic of the world and they're there to remind us that there's magic. Um, so every few years I'd be in the office and I'd be like, oh, I need a break from this. And I'd go and work as a nanny again or
Wow.
coaching parents or a night nurse or whatever it was. And then, oh, I need to get back into the office world. So I'd go back to the office world. And sort of every 3 or 4 years, I'd flip and flip and flip. Um, so it's always between those two. But in my office world, I worked my way up, and I originally worked for a hearing aid specialist, a doctor. Then I, moved on to a fashion world. Then I
Huh.
moved into the restaurant world. Then I moved into weddings. Then I moved into the diamond district. Then I moved into startups and all puns. And then I went freelance. And for me, it was just about if the company's interesting, the job's the same. So I don't care. It's about who I'm working with and do I believe in the product? Because if I do, it's fine. If I don't, I'm not interested.
Interesting.
And so I floated between the two. But in the childcare form, I've done lots of things from helping people open kindergartens and teaching parents about the first year of life and milestones and steps that they have to look out for, giving them routines, nannying, night nursing, um, all sorts of stuff.
Did you have any expectations for your life though when you were a teenager?
Yeah. Number one, I don't know why. It's so funny. I was so by it as a teenager, and I'm so not into it now. But I really wanted to be a catwalk makeup artist, particularly catwalk. I felt that makeup on catwalk was so artistic, and I really wanted to go to school for it. Um,
Fascinating.
but I realized I wasn't artistic. And then I thought I was going to be a baker, which I was at one point in my career too, for a brief while,
Cool.
because it's my hobby. Um, to be honest with you, I just wanted to work. I don't know if it was anything else. I just wanted to work. I remember at 15 having a meeting with my parents and my teachers because I wasn't going to school. And I said to them, but why do I have to be here? Let me just go and work. Like, I'm not learning anything useful here. Let me go work. And I still feel that way about school, by the way. Yeah, I wanted to get out and I knew I would be a businesswoman and I wanted to find opportunities that were interesting. I had zero idea that I would end up where I do. But for me, it was really just about when I was younger, I thought I would be a makeup artist until I was about 18 or 19.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So, I think it's interesting because I know that you've had issues with mind, body, and soul over the years. And I know that that's also like your mantra, right? Mind, body, and soul. And I think it's interesting because I know that you had dealt with a lot of mental health issues when you were a teenager. So I think that's also interesting that you had such ambition, but you were struggling so much with mental health.
So I grew up around mental health issues. My mother suffered with anxiety and depression. My sister suffered with anxiety and depression. Um, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder and anxiety at 13. I was diagnosed with depression at 14. Um, at 15, I spent 3 months in my bed. I refused to get up. Didn't really understand at the time, I suppose, but I just kind of felt like I didn't want to be alive. Um, at 19, I suffered a very bad bout of depression again and had a light attempt on my life. Didn't actually go through with anything. Found myself in a situation where I sort of came to, and there was a knife in my hands on my skin, um, but I couldn't do it, which looking back was just a big cry for help. Um, I spent a few months in bed then as well. It was offered to my mum that she could look after me or hospitalize me, and she, thank goodness, decided to take me. And I left home at 18, so I went to her place and got me help. And then I suffered with depression on and off throughout my 20s. And between the ages of 20 and 30, didn't do any talk therapy at all. Felt very much like it wasn't time. I was dealing with my physical issues then, and we just took loads of pills to shut up the voices. And then at 30, it was like I woke up 2 weeks after my birthday and someone had put the light on and said, "Hey, you're not happy. You think you're happy, but you're not happy. You could be a lot happier." And I started the journey of working with the trauma therapists and spent 3.5 years in trauma therapy. That's when I also started to incorporate somatic therapies and learn them, should I say.
Interesting, interesting. So what are somatic therapies?
So I started to realize that you have to do more than talk when it comes to trauma. Um, and I had interest in a course for a while and I hadn't jumped off. And I saw it advertised, and then I bumped into the woman who runs it. And I said to her, "I'm desperate to do your course." It was called Breathe and Receive. And I said, "I'm desperate." She said, "Funnily enough, we have another one starting in 2 weeks. I've got one space left." And I was like, "Send me the details. Send me the details." She forgot for about a week. Then she sent me the details. I read them and I went, "I'm in. Take my money. Let's go. I'll find a way to pay for this." It was a 3-week course on meditation and mindfulness and breathing techniques. And I just felt that I was in a situation. I had been in trauma therapy for a few months. Now, in trauma therapy, you start all the way at the beginning of your life and you go through each and every relationship, cousins, friends, uncles, aunts, siblings, grandparents, etc., and broke every single part of my life down from the moment I was born until where I was at. And it was having a lot of physical repercussions on me. It's no secret that I have anxiety. It's no secret that I have depression and stuff. I have gone through big periods of my life where panic attacks were severely impacting my life. And I noticed the panic attacks came back. And when I have a panic attack, I can hyperventilate to the point of passing out. Um, it had happened to me a few times in my life when I was younger, once in a nightclub. And my friends were like, "We got to get her out of here right now." And they just kind of hold my hands. Um, and I could feel that I wasn't breathing and that I was, when I'm dealing with emotional stuff, it comes out in my dreams. I have severe nightmares. I talk out loud in my sleep. I shout in my sleep. I cry in my sleep. The rest of the time, this doesn't happen.
I'm just laughing because I am known as like a very intense dreamer. I have always had very intense dreams and like they can sometimes be exhausting. Like I'll wake up and I'm just like, did
Yeah,
I
you're
sleep at
exhausted.
all?
You're exhausted. So that only happens to me when I'm going through something emotional and triggering. So I was dealing with that at the time and I wanted to learn how to control it. So I started this course. It was a small group. It was the same women through this course. I was about to go to England for something, I don't remember what. And England is often a trigger for me, and I know that. Um, and so I made sure that I was going to be taking this course seriously. And the mindfulness was, you know, paying attention to when you're chewing your food, walking across the street and actually knowing that you're moving and not just autopiloting. Breathwork exercises. they were like, do it every morning. And so I started to do every time, at the time I was living in Tel Aviv, so I was walking a lot. Every time I got to a crossing of a red light, I would make myself do the breathing exercise until the light went green.
Wow.
And that's how I started to incorporate it. The first time we did breathing properly there and they asked us to lay down and close our eyes, I couldn't. And I realized for the first time that I was terrified of silence and darkness. And I'd never been aware of that before. But I have always slept with noise. Now, when I was young, my mum started it because I'm the youngest in the family and we were a household that had people over. And so my mum put music on so that I would sleep through everything. Um, and it wasn't until I was 35 that I remember ever having going to sleep in silence. But at the time, she asked us to lay down and close eyes, and I couldn't do it. I was terrified, and I found myself shaking and crying. I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't handle it. And to me, it was something I had to fight. I had to deal with. So through this course, I learned how to deal with that stuff. And then this amazing healer, her name is Maxine Isaacs. We worked together on and off for years. She took me through many journeys, including some of the weirdest things I have ever been a part of in my life. I mean, weird, okay? Like I did a rebirthing session once. It was the weirdest thing I've ever done. Like I literally like had to birth myself through like a crown of pillows. Super weird. I remember going, what do you want me to do? Okay, like so weird. But all of it had a purpose. Movement. I love to dance. Learning from her that, trauma sits on the cellular levels and talking is wonderful. CBT in particular, great therapy, but you have to move it out your body because it actually sits in us. Learning what generational trauma was sitting in my cells and what that meant, holding other people's trauma, which I was aware of I was doing, but I wasn't aware of why. I did something fascinating that forever changed me called recall therapy, where I actually had to interview my mum for about 2 hours before I could do it. I had to go back to her grandparents and understand miscarriages, abortions, births, menstrual cycles, how many children in each family and what order. It was life changing. My whole psyche felt like I could get to a point of not forgiveness for certain things, but understanding of certain things. And it was really, really important to me to understand that I could take control of my emotional state. And I don't think I'd ever realized that I could take control before. And rather than just, well, this is my issue. These are my things. This is my story. We all have issues. I'm the first person to say everyone's got an issue. Mine is abandonment issues. Everyone's got problems in life. Hashem gives everyone a major task in life. Mine's medical. Deeper than that, I didn't see. And once I saw it, I refused to allow it to be the rest of my life. I wanted to live life differently. And the only way to do that was to face this stuff head on.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Anything But Traditional. I love Tasha. She was awesome to have on. As you've seen, we spoke a lot about emotional health and also physical health. It really is a podcast of mind, body, and soul. And I thank Tasha a lot for sharing her experiences. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and give a review. I always love to see the review, so if you can give a review, that would be amazing. I love when you guys rate the podcast, so please help me out. If you're enjoying the podcast, please go on over to Spotify or Apple or YouTube. I also wanted to remind you guys that I am a social media manager and content creator. So first of all, if you aren't following Tales of Tamar on Instagram, you totally should. And if you want to work together, my website is tales-of.com. It will be in the show notes, and I look forward to working with you. And now, back to this episode.
I've always been into acupuncture. So I retook that up. It was massively important to me to understand that some of what my trauma is from is physical stuff, and I had to deal with the physical part. For instance, a lot of the body damage comes from a car accident I was in when I was 20, and I spent years laying in bed, and I wanted out. I wanted out of my bed. I wanted to live a normal life. The main reason that I actually decided to actually take the step and start the therapy, my first phone call with her was, look, I don't have a huge budget, but I'm really serious about committing to this. I need to learn how to live with chronic pain and not let it take over my entire brain, not let it take over my entire
Wow.
world, which I'd started with serious back issues when I was 15. So I was 15 years
Before
in
the
at this point
accident.
before the accident. So I was
Wow.
15 years into my body controlling me. And I thought, how am I ever supposed to have a life like this? How am I supposed to get married? How am I supposed to potentially be a mum? How, how do I not lose the amount of jobs that I'd had to give up because suddenly my body needed a certain amount of treatment that was going to be months long? I was fed up. I
So
was
how
fed
did
up.
you do it? How did you overcome? What tools did you actually use to be like, okay, I'm gonna keep working and I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna keep moving and I'm gonna keep despite the chronic pain?
So first of all, we went through and understood all the trauma from my childhood, which, to an extent, everybody has some, because parenting is kind of that impossible job that we're given. And I started to understand what was actually going on in my body. My biggest issue with Western medicine is nobody takes the time to explain to you how things are working in your body and what's affecting this and why it does that and this and the other. They just go, okay, you've got disc problems. So you've got a bulge in L4 or 5, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't tell you anything. And so I started to want to know why I was now losing suddenly feeling in my hands, get more scans. I mean, I was in the hospital all the time at this point. I was at a point where I was taking 4 epidurals a year. Each one needs a good 2-week recovery. I was
Wow.
going through anything. I mean, at one point, they wanted to put electrode needles in my body, a battery that looks like the size of an egg in your backside, and control it with a remote control watch to electrocute yourself up your spinal cord, which is what Superman had, the guy who played Superman. And I booked and cancelled that surgery 3 times and thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a bionic woman. It doesn't feel okay. And I wanted to know what was causing what. So for years, I didn't have any feeling in my left foot. I had about 80% numbness in my left foot. And I didn't truly understand why. And I just spent years of laying in bed frustrated. So I started to do everything people were asking me to do. Go and do this. Make sure you're started with something that called the Alexander technique. Started with acupuncture again. Started with breath work. Started with trauma therapy. Started with mindfulness. Started with, not just popping those pills in my mouth all day long. In my 20s, at one point, for quite a few years, I was on 38 tablets a day. Yeah. Um, they put me on benzos when
Wow.
I was 15 years old. And for 20 years, I took them like they were candy. And for a good 10 of those years, I was taking 40 milligrams of diazepam a day, which most people, if you go to the dentist, they give you 2. And people were like, how are you standing? I was like, doesn't seem to affect me. And I could never leave the house without my pills because if my body went into spasm, I was messed up. So I started to follow, but I was still finding myself laying in bed. It was frustrating. It was like, I'm doing everything they want me to do. I'm doing rehabilitation. I'm doing this, doing that. And then, there were some people who don't get it and they were saying, but this person got back to their life and that person went to the physio gym and it worked. And it was making me feel even worse about myself. Why doesn't it work with me? Why does everyone think I'm lazy?
100%.
I'm not lazy. I'm in agony. My family used to call me Slimps a lot, or joke that they could play the hula hoop game on me because my body would be doing this. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I was actually registered disabled in England, because I would fall over multiple times a day. Um, and slowly, 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 it was taking over my life. And so I started to really work on the routine of doing my stretches every single night, of the simple act of laying down on the ground with my head raised every single night for a good half an hour, making sure that I realigned my spine. And it's such a simple thing. I can't tell you how hard I found it to do every day and to not stop. I used to say to myself, okay, put an episode of Friends on. Tasha, you're not allowed to get off this floor until the episode is over. Do not get here. You are glued to the floor until the episode is over. At one point, I was living with one of my best friends, and I used to say to her, can you come and keep me company for 20 minutes so I don't sit up? Because I have to be on this ground. Why was it so hard? My mum had cancer a few years ago. Thank God she's fine. But she still has to do physio because they had to affect in her lymph nodes and stuff. And when I talk to the soldiers and I say to them, if you stretched for 15 minutes every day, 90% of your pains would go down. And they're like, I know. Why do we find such a simple thing so hard to do? Maybe because it doesn't show you quick results. Maybe because it doesn't show you muscles. Maybe because it's mundane and our lives are busy and stressful enough. But for whatever reason, it's hard to make this stuff your routine. It really is for
Yeah.
most people. And I struggled. And I think it was maybe 2018. The hospital were really running out of ideas of what to help me. I have an amazing pain clinic here, but they were running out of ideas. And then the doctor came to me and he said, I thought of one more thing. Let's try it. They offered me a 10-week course of lidocaine and magnesium infusions with the hope that it would give me longer term pain relief. And I think that was the turning point for me. It was possibly the worst experience of any of the medical treatments I've tried. 6 weeks in, I begged them to stop. By the second week, I was in bed. I was working somewhere and I had to quit my job immediately and get into bed. And I stayed there for 3 months. Everything in my body hurt. My teeth hurt. I had metal taste in my mouth all the time.
Oh
Insane headache
man.
all the time. Every bone hurt. The pain level was just taking over. And I think that was the tipping point for me. I was like, I'm done listening to you guys. I'm done. Like, all you want to do is cut me open. For 7 or 8 years now, I've been fighting doctors who want to do operations on me. And I was like, I'm done. You're not controlling this because what you're doing isn't working. In the same way that taking the pills is a band aid, but if you don't do the work as well, it's not going to work. I'm taking control now. I'm going to do this. And I was really strict on what foods I ate, on my exercise time, on everything. I was really strict on it. And I was still having a couple of relapses a year and it was stressing me out. But I was seeing small improvements each year that went by over this sort of 5 or 6 year period. I later had a nervous breakdown for completely different reasons, which I can talk about if you want. The last day of 2020, I had been in a very difficult place that year. The last 6 months were
Well, you had a broken engagement.
I had a broken engagement. I was supposed to get married August 2020. I called off the wedding about 7 weeks beforehand because of COVID. Thank you so much, Hashem, for COVID in that manner.
Wait, you
Um,
called off the wedding just because of COVID,
because of COVID.
meaning it wasn't anything to do with your relationship.
Well, at the time, I was trying to tell myself it was anything to do with my relationship. In reality, it was the loneliest and the most unhappy I've ever been in a relationship. It's also the only relationship I've ever been in where he wasn't my best friend. Um, he caught me when I was vulnerable. When we met, I had been on bed rest for 3 months. I had broken up with my previous boyfriend, who was my best friend, and we loved each other dearly, but we were not right for each other, and we both knew. And we broke up in the emergency room as friends. He had taken me to the emergency room because my body was in crazy spasm and it wouldn't stop. And I just looked at him and I said, it's okay. Not everybody can deal with someone like me. I've got disabilities. It impacts my life and will do forever. And I know you can't deal with it. And I forgive you. And we
Wow.
ended. I then spent 3 months in bed. I'd already been in bed for a while. I then spent another 2 months in bed and then met my now ex-fiance, who at the time just said everything I wanted was exactly what he wanted and he was ready to give it to me. And I was vulnerable. I was scared. I was being told I had to have surgery on my spine and my neck. I was terrified of how I was going to do it. And I wasn't able to work a lot. And I only have myself to be financially dependent on. And I wanted so much everything that he said he wanted to give me, including starting surrogacy journey. He's the first person I ever lived with. I moved in after 6 weeks. He told me, let's get going with surrogacy, move in. And so I did. And Then later, he changed his mind to adoption. Fine by me. That's why we were getting married. Because in Israel, you have to be a married couple for 2 years before you're eligible for adoption. And I was 34 years old. That's why we got engaged. And actually, before he actually proposed, I already had my wedding dress.
I don't know if I can ask this. Like, you also can say that this is totally not appropriate for the podcast, but are you unable to carry a child?
Um, so I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 20. I was diagnosed with something called a prolactinary tumor when I was 21. It is a tumor in my hormone, in my prolactin here, which controls all your hormones and your ovulation, etc. Um, I have struggled with menstrual cycles since I got them. Excessive bleeding, 21, 22-day cycles most of my life. At one point, I had a cycle that lasted 3 months. And between that and the stuff with my spine, I was advised not to try and carry if it was even possible. I was told I would most likely at least need IVF. I made the decision at the age of 30 to freeze my eggs. So I went through, when you freeze your eggs, you go through IVF all the way up to where they, instead of making an embryo and put it back in you, you go through the same process. Um, I was told that it would be unlikely for me to conceive naturally. And if I would conceive, I would probably be on bed rest the majority of the time because of my back.
Wow.
So I had already conceded to the fact that I probably wouldn't be able to carry a child. I don't believe that any longer, by the way.
Wow.
I'm in the best physical place I've ever been.
How did you get there?
So when I had my nervous breakdown,
Yeah.
it was shortly after I left my fiance. It was during COVID. We were in lockdown. My mother got diagnosed with cancer the same week. I was in a very vulnerable place. There was a lot of screaming at me. I don't do very well when people scream at me. And it had been months and months of people screaming. I had been thrown out of my house the last few days of the year. I had to put my dog in a kennel situation, and I was terrified, and I had a very serious attempt at my life. I very much did not want to be here, did not see a way back up. I'm very open about this because I believe that we should be. Had my best friend not got to me in time, I would not be here today. After that, I went to what's called a balance house. This is a live-in therapy situation. And when I got there, I was in early stages of another relapse, and I wasn't allowed to use marijuana there. I've had a medical marijuana prescription for 12 years now. It got me away
Wow.
from all the prescription drugs. Um, but I wasn't allowed to smoke there, wasn't allowed to use my oils or my tablets of it or anything. And I thought, I only get 6 weeks here. I don't want to spend it in bed. How do I get out of this? And I was really trying to keep going. And I decided to just push, 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 make sure I did my stretches twice a day, made sure I spoke to them and said, listen, I can't do the regular yoga class. Don't make me. I can't do the walks to the beach. I can't do the sports groups. But I am here and I will be here because it was so important for me. It's the most amazing place in the world. And it was a gift from Hashem. 6 weeks of live-in therapy where I didn't have to have any outside noise of the world. And I made the connection there that I call the triangle lesson. And I teach this to people all the time. I was frustrated. I'm working so hard, but why am I constantly falling backwards? It's one step forward, two steps back with my body. What's happening? Why can't I get through this barrier? And when I was in this situation in this home, this lesson clicked. If we do not take care of our mind, our body, and our soul constantly, we will tilt. We are always going to fall. We are a triangle. So if I stop thinking about my mind and I just take care of my soul and my body, I'm still falling all the time. And
Yeah.
that was the lesson that changed my physical body forever, please God. Now I'm aware I could have a relapse, but I am 4 years without having had a relapse and down to one epidural a year. I didn't think I could get here. But in there, I learned this lesson that the reason I was constantly failing was because I was only ever taking care of one or two parts of me. It was, or I'm going to focus on my body, in which case, forget about depression, forget about anxiety, because you can't. You just got to focus on the body now. Or it was, what do I want to do for Tash? What does my soul want? And it will make my head better. But then my natural form is go, 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 go. Yeah, you burn out. I was in bed 4 times a year because I'm overdoing it all the time, but that's what my heart wants to do. I'm great out there, but my body can't keep up with me. And in this house, they taught me the lesson that I now refer to as the triangle.
Wow.
And that's what this is. It's my reminder. Don't, and I have it on my right arm specifically because it's my predominant arm and I drive with this arm and I want it in my face all the time. You're not allowed to forget this. In fact, on my fridge and on my bathroom mirror, it says the triangle comes first because it has to. And ever since I learnt that balance, I haven't had a relapse. And it means that, yeah, okay, so there is times like a few months ago, I was like, I really wanted to get my walking higher. I mean, like, I'm stuck on 3 to 4 kilometers every day. That's what my body can comfortably do. I wanted to push it and I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. And so for a month, I had some serious pain and now I'm back to working at it. I'm still in that stuck zone of it, but okay, just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. I'm exhausted. I'm busy, but I have to do my stretches every day because if I don't do it, I'll be in more pain tomorrow and it's not worth it. And the other thing I realized was my mood was so affected from pain and frustration, like severely affected from pain and frustration. And I really dislike that. Sometimes I say to people, I'm sorry, I know I'm really bitchy today. I'm sorry, I'm really snappy. I'm just in pain. But I'm also the last person to admit when I'm in pain. And I was like, I hate this about me and I don't want to. I want to better myself. So I just kept working on it and learning that lesson meant that I have to work on all of that, not just my body. And that's what got me healthier.
1,000%. So, okay, so I know that you've been on a few other podcasts, and you focused on Chayal's Angels.
By the way, I love that this is different because Chayal's Angels is made from me, but this is such a different. I love this.
Thank you so much. So you took that triangle, and you really gave it to the Chayalim with Chayal's Angels, right? And you started it on October 8th.
I started October 27th. That was the first day I took therapists to soldiers. Yeah,
Okay, but weren't you doing stuff on October 8th?
I was. Yeah. So October 7th, I was supposed to be in the South at a dance festival, but not a dance party. I do something called ecstatic dance, which is um, super healing, by the way. It starts with a warm-up session of opening the playfulness inside the body. It's done in silence, it's done barefoot, it's closed with a meditation. I love that I don't have to talk to anyone,
It's so
and
interesting though, because like, was it near the Nova Festival
it
at all?
was it was just a kilometer
Wow.
away, and I was meant to be there the week before. They'd asked me if I would go and help, and I said, "Yeah, I can
Wow.
come down for a few days." And then a couple of days before it, I called them and I just said, "I'm so sorry. I hate to cancel on people, but something it's just not going to work this week. I have to stay home." Something inside me just said, "You're not going."
Wow. Was anyone affected by the massacres? Or, like, what happened to the people that were there?
Um, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of trauma.
Wow.
They were affected. I don't believe the
Very.
camp was attacked itself, but as they were trying to get out, yes.
Oh,
Because
wow.
the terrorists were all over the roads in the south. So you couldn't get out without going through it.
Do you have any bit of, like, survivor's guilt, do you feel?
Very much so. The first time I went to Nova was mostly because I have heavy survivor's guilt. Every time I go to Nova, which I suppose I go every 6 months, um, I feel so connected to all of them. I'm so grateful that I wasn't there, but guilty. My mother just came for a visit for the first time since the war broke out, and I took her down to Nova where one of her closest friends' son was killed. Jake Marlowe was a hero, and he was working security, and he jumped up on the stage and get people out, and he saved a lot of people, but he didn't make it out himself. And we went down to see him, and I just kept saying to my mum, I'm so thankful I'm here with you.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of guilt.
So wow. So on October 8th, when you saw everything that went on and you could have been there.
So by the evening on October 7th, I started to text people in my area and said, like, do your husbands need rides to Miloim? Do your children need rides to Miloim? I'm single. I don't have children. I have a car. I love to drive. Let me help. I just, I had to get out there. Like, it was burning in me. I couldn't sit here any longer. I had to help. Um, and I started by taking on the morning of October 8th, a close friend of mine who we grew up in the houses opposite each other in London. Her husband had to go to Miloim and she was 37 weeks pregnant. Yeah, it wasn't fun taking him out the house, but I said, I'm coming. He called me and said, I have to go. And I said, I'm coming. I then got a notification that a very close friend, little brother, had been murdered the day before in Nachaloz, Nathaniel Young. Um, and it spurred me even deeper to help our soldiers, to help our nation. To this day, the only funeral I stopped for was Nathaniel Young's. I'd known him his entire life. Um, and all I kept,
Also, there was a siren at the funeral,
there
which
was a
was
siren in the middle of
insane.
the funeral where both of his sisters, who were both 6 months pregnant, and his sister-in-law, who was pregnant, all had to get down on the ground. Um, it was very hard. I will never, all I could hear that day was the moment his mum told me she was pregnant with him. We were 16, 17 years old, and just remember hearing, just kept saying, like, Tasha, I'm pregnant. And I was like, what? What do you mean you're
Wow,
pregnant?
you were very, very close to them.
His eldest sister, I was her bridesmaid. We've been friends for 30 years. We have thrown each other our 30th birthday parties, her university going party. I planned her engagement with her husband. I went with him to choose the ring. Um, I decorated the house for the proposal. We are very close friends. We lived together for some time. We are extremely close, and she is the oldest. Therefore, I know all the siblings well.
Wow.
They've been in my
That's
life since I was
Gabby?
11 years old. That's Gabby, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, they're a very important family to me, and Gabby and I have been very close friends since we were 11 years old. Um, so yeah, I said, okay, I will go to his funeral, but that day I dropped my dog off at a friend of mine, and I just said, I'm going to a funeral. I need you to take her. I don't know when I'm picking her up. It could be a day, could be a week. I don't know. She ended up there for 2 months. Good friends, poor Luna. But after his funeral, it was more important than ever that I go and help our soldiers. I'm not quite sure how my number got out everywhere. I was receiving somewhere around 15 phone calls a day asking for help. I found myself on the roads an average of 12 hours a day, sometimes more. Lots of therapists around my area were helping me get through it because of being in the car that much. My body was breaking. So a local chiropractor, some somatic healers, some acupuncturists, they were all really helping me out. And one of them said to me, like, maybe we can go to the soldiers. And I was like, I don't know. And a few days later, I said to a soldier, do you think it'd be possible? And he was like, yeah, maybe. So I just put a call of action out there and was like, hi, I'm looking for some practitioners who want to help me. Let's go help them.
Wow.
No one was helping in the north. And I was like, I'm not going to wait for anyone. We'll do it. And the first time I took practitioners to a base was October 27th, 2023. To date, we've given out almost 11,000 treatments. We've done close to, I think it's around 160 base days. We've worked with thousands and thousands of soldiers, and we go out every single week, Halamad, Pesach included.
Wow, I would love to join, at some point. I don't know if I could,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, I
maybe
always like
I
to have an
maybe
assistant or two with me because I can be quite crazy busy on those days.
So maybe me and my husband can join and, I'd love to be the assistant and help out and all that. So we'll have to figure that out. Um but wow, that's amazing. So there's been 11,000 treatments to
Yeah.
date.
I recognized we were all in a state of shock slash trauma. Okay. But the trauma wasn't even really there. We were just still trying to piece everything together. Um, and I have had years, I've had most of my life living in chronic pain and dealing with holistic therapies that can help. And I obviously the last decade I've immersed myself in it. And I said, I know what can help you. So let me bring it for you. And so I started to gather physiotherapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, Reiki healers, breathwork specialists, anything I could to help them, because I recognized immediately that this was going to be an entire nation with post trauma. And we are lucky enough to be in the generation that accepts post trauma as a thing. The generation before us that fought in the previous Lebanon war, that wasn't a thing. And those men weren't given help. And my generation of people, 40 to 60 years old, have grown up with parents with severe PTSD, and we've seen the effect it's had on us. And I want that to not happen to the future generations. That's how we save people. We save the futures. And I knew immediately we had to get working on it now. We had to get working on it now to try and lower it as much as possible. On top of that, these men were all Miloimnik. They were all reservists, meaning they have spent the last decade or so at home in their offices, carrying their children. That's not the time you look after your body. When you got young ones at home, when you're running your business, when you're trying to make your savings and buy a house, you're not caring about your body. So they were suffering and they were sleeping on the ground and they didn't have mattresses yet and they were in so much pain. And I was like, you don't need a massage, you need an array of things. So I very quickly understood that. And I don't really know how, maybe I guess it's all my operational experience, but I just intuitively knew what to do and was like, okay, so you're going to get this treatment, then this treatment, then this treatment. And over time, I built up how I did intakes and stuff. And now we have this amazing system where I ask them 5 to 8 questions and I can get a really good picture of what they are and what they need. And we offer them everything we can and we go back to them week in,
Wow.
week out. And I tell them all the time, I don't care how big you are. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how independent you are. No one here is okay and nobody is immune to post trauma and potential suicides. And we have a duty to stop that happening.
You're
Um,
amazing.
and that's why I do it, because I had a chance to turn my pain into healing. Um, and the reality is, just to give you a small side note story, that I know it's been said in other podcasts, I'm not going to go into too much of it, but exactly 1 month after we started Chayal's Angels, I was in a near death experience. I was in a horrendous car accident. And thank God someone managed to pull me out just in time from my car that was on fire, just a couple of seconds before it exploded. And I remember at first I was like, why won't you let me die, Hashem? I don't want to be here anymore. This world, I don't want a part of it. I've had suicide attempts. Why won't you let me go? All these people just got killed. Let me go. I don't want to be in this. And a few days later, when I went to go and bench Gomel at my local synagogue with a friend, it all clicked in. 3 weeks before October 7th, I had changed my name. And my local Rav had done my name change for me on Rosh Hashanah. And I went from being Natasha, Chana being my Hebrew name and my middle name, to being Tasha Chana. And that was the first time that anybody had used my now given name, was when they went to bench Gomel for me over the Torah.
Wow.
That was the first time someone had used my name. And it hit me like a ton of bricks as Hashem saved me so I can go help. It was the
Wow. That's
timing of everything was just, here's my name. I had been at the Kotel 5 weeks prior to October 7th. praying over what my name was, begging Hashem to show me what my name should be. My Rav then said to me, I'm going to go to Oman last minute. Can I do it there? And I said, yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me, but I know it means stuff to you. Go for it. I have prayed and prayed and
Wow.
prayed for Hashem to show me what my tough kid here is. And that was the moment in synagogue where I realized I was gifted my tough kid.
Wow. That's amazing.
So
I love it.
when you first approached me and you said, like, I hope I'm not offending you. I normally only take traditionally religious women. I was like, I am religious. I struggle with the boundaries. I struggle with the boxes. I struggle with halacha. I really struggle with halacha. I light Shabbat candles. I make havdalah, but I keep Shabbat in my way, not in the way that you would expect me to. Because for me, it's about being a good person. It's about listening to Hashem. It's about watching what he's showing you. It's about walking around with your eyes open and watching for the signs. Every time I see the iron dome go off or people not getting out on the side of the road and getting to safety. My mum was here and she experienced her first azaka, her first siren. And we were in the middle of Highway 4. And I said, it's okay, Mum. She was like, what do we do? What do we do? I said, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. We're going to get out the side of the car. We're going to climb onto the barrier. We're going to lay down and put your hands over your head, protect your head. And I explained to her, this is for shrapnel, and all her anxiety calmed down. And she said to me, why are the people still driving? Why hasn't everyone got out? Why are those people standing on the side of the road and not laying down? And I said, because those are the people that are silly. Hashem sent them a vessel. They chose not to use it. You heard of that story of the man in the hurricane and Hashem sends him a boat and he says, why didn't you save me? Well, they chose not to get in the boat. Hashem gave us a boat. That's what the siren is. Get into safety. Here's your boat. And that is how I see it.
Wow, I love it. So, okay. Well, Tasha, is there, I normally ask about a pasuk or a quote that keeps you motivated, that keeps you going. Um, I feel like for you it's footsteps, but let me know if I'm wrong.
You are.
Yeah?
You're wrong.
I'm wrong. Wow.
I have worn this ring every day since I was 22 years old. This is emulated on Shlomo Melech's ring. It says on the outside, Gam Ze Yavo, Gam Ze Yavo. Shlomo Melech, when he was reigning, he wore a ring like this. And he had it written on both sides, specifically so that when you're going through the good times, you appreciate them because it won't always be good. The bad has come back. And when you're going through the hardships, it will also go away and the good will come back. And that is the thing that I hold on to.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. So, how could somebody help out with the organization? If somebody knows somebody that needs the help of the organization, just yeah, if you can just share that.
So first of all, you can find me on all regular platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Tasha Cohen. Pretty recognizable. I have pink hair. You can also reach out to me via our website, chayalsangels.org. Chayal's Angels is Chayals. Unfortunately, number one thing we need is funding. I am going on a little fundraising tour later on this year. We are 18 months in. I and my staff don't have salaries and must get salaries for them this year. We need marketing budgets and all sorts. We need connections to press in Israel. It's really hard to get the Israeli press to pay any attention to me because I'm not a native Israeli speaker. If you are a practitioner, come and help us. I don't care if you're here for a day or 3 months. We rely heavily on people flying in to help us, in particular, physiotherapists and chiropractors. There is no chiropractic school in Israel. We rely, again, if you're in Israel and you can come once a week to help us or once every 3 months, please do. Massage, Reiki, yoga, meditation, breath work, physio, chiro, acupuncture, you name it, we'll try it, basically. We are currently starting to look for an app developer who wants to help me with a very important project.
Wow.
There is so many
Cool.
forms that people can help, marketing, fundraising, all these things. My thing is, we all have to be involved in this war. Every single one of us has a duty to be involved here. And when I first started, I was like, I just found a way for you to help. So don't go pick oranges or pack food boxes. If you're an acupuncturist, come and help the soldiers. And so it's the same thing. You only have an hour a day to sit on a computer and help us. Go help us. Help us reach out to communities across the world and see if they would be interested in choosing us as the sponsorship for their synagogue, or for a company to use us as their social action work. We are a tiny little company that is just in the beginning stages of our journey. And if you've got an idea and you think you can help us, I want to hear it.
So last question, how have you supported yourself over the last 18 months?
Hashem, 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 Hashem. I have another picture on my bathroom mirror that says Imuna, Imuna, Imuna. You're not supposed to see the whole picture. Um, there has been months where I had no idea how I was going to pay my rent tomorrow. Hashem drops it in my lap at the last minute. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I am a part of something called Sal Shikum in Israel, which is a rehabilitation program for mental health. Best thing I ever did, by the way, was be honest about having a mental health account and not hide it anymore from the government and the doctors, because I have actually got so much help. I've got social work and company. My Majahaj just walked in the house. They come to help me every week with stuff. They help me with the bureaucratic stuff with Chayal's Angels too. This morning my fridge broke. My social worker happened to be coming, and I was like, "Can you help me phone people? I need a fridge. I've got an hour to do this." Um, and so I get a small amount of money from the government every month that I've been using to pay my rent, and the rest of it, I honestly don't know where it comes from. It comes from Hashem.
Wow. Amazing. Well, Tasha, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for
I
having me.
really appreciated it.
Just want to say, by the way, this is such a great podcast format, and I could sit and talk for hours about the kind of questions, because the fact that they're different kind of questions and they're about Imuna and they're about the strength of Judaism, it's so like, it's so important to me that people know that Hashem rules everything. It's so important to me. I've seen friends really struggle with their Imuna in the last 18 months. Like, but why is Hashem putting us through this? And they're so angry at Hashem. And for me, it's done the exact opposite. It's made me feel closer than ever to Hashem. It's made me know I get to see miracles on a daily basis. I mean, how many rockets have come in and how many people have, God forbid, been killed from them, right?
Yeah,
To
it's
me,
amazing.
that is such a blessing. And I feel like I'm so privileged that Hashem asked me to help our Chaylim. And it has brought so much wonderfulness to my life. And also being able to see how many of our Chaylim have become closer to Hashem in the last 18 months.
Wow.
I think they really realize that the real protection that they have over them is God. And without God protecting
Wow.
them, it doesn't matter where they are. Their vest ain't going to save them. Their bullet ain't, whatever. And it's a huge, huge amount of soldiers that have deepened their faith. And that to me is like, I'm so lucky to be in the middle of it. I think for me personally, the fact that it's brought my mum closer to Judaism and to accepting God has been so exciting. Like, she started wearing a Magen David after October 7th. She never wore a Magen David her whole
Ah,
life. She's aware of the importance of Israel, and that if it's becomes more unsafe in Europe, she has to think about coming here, and she's opening. And that is not something I ever would have had before. For me, it was the beginning of COVID. I turned around to people and I said, this is the beginning of the waterless flood. Hashem promised after Noach never to use water again. This is the beginning. And I was told from my friends and my family that I was crazy. You lost it. You read too many dystopian books. That's it. You're losing your mind. And I was like, trust me. What happened? COVID finished. No one learned anything. They went even further with all their stuff. Boom. World War III started.
wow. Crazy. Well, thank you so much, Tasha,
Thanks
for
so
coming
much for
on and
having me.
sharing all of this, and I really appreciated it. All the best.